Good evening and welcome. My name is Amitabh Chandra. I'm a faculty member at Harvard Business School and at the Kennedy School of Government. I also lead HBS's new joint degree program in the life sciences. It's a joint degree program with Harvard Medical School and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and it focuses on innovation to create transformational medicines. So medicine and innovation are very much in the air here, especially as Boston emerges as one of the principal hubs for life sciences innovation in the world. And tonight we get to add music, which is another source of healing and gathering to the conversation. The Longwood Symphony Orchestra, which will play for us tonight, is a unique organization that combines music and medicine to serve the community. Composed of medical professionals who are also highly trained musicians, the LSO has established the Healing Art of Music program, an award-winning philanthropic model through which it uses its concerts to help nonprofit organizations raise funds for noble causes that bring about medical and social change and aid the medically underserved. This remarkable symphony has also got a community outreach program that brings free chamber music directly to patients who cannot attend these concerts. The program operates across Massachusetts in hospitals, rehabilitation centers, hospices, and other healthcare facilities. We will hear tonight from members of the orchestra in a few moments, but I did want to tell you all that this event today has brought us all together is part of HubWeek Open Doors Boston, which is a monthly event series that allows the community to experience the innovation that's happening in different corners of Boston. And one such innovation hub is right here in Allston, where we are tonight. Allston, as many of you know, is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Boston and is also going through a lot of change as it expands and redevelops its community. We're extremely grateful to BNY Mellon for their generosity. So again, for those of you who have never been to HBS before, and to our glorious Klarman Hall, welcome. Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you. So we're at Harvard University. We're not going to be able to listen to music without a seminar, debate, Q&A. And so I want to, what makes this so much fun is being able to have a conversation with these terrific scientists, musicians. So I'm going to start with introducing Dr. Tom Sheldon, who's the music director, who's the medical director of radiation oncology at the Concord Hospital in New Hampshire and was previously on the faculty at Harvard Medical School. He plays oboe and English horn for the symphony and is on their board of directors. He has participated in radiobiology and advanced breast cancer research, along with pioneering work combining chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and surgery in lung cancer. He has worked extensively with the American Cancer Society, serving as the New Hampshire president, and is on the national board of directors. So thank you for that. And I spent my whole life staying away from radiation oncology and the English horn. So those two things are
smart on both.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we're just thrilled to have you tell us a little bit more about the role of communication in arts and medicine. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so you talked a little bit about my medical CV. I started playing music like many people up here as a child and played through college and took actually 25 years off until I discovered the Longwood Symphony. And it's been very gratifying for me to start playing again and enjoy my music. I'm really interested in the intersection of music and medicine, and especially how musical training can enhance our medical skills and our communication skills with patients and their families. In music, we start by learning the beats, the tempos, and the rhythms. We're taught dynamics, when to play loud, when to play soft, what to emphasize, and when to relax. After years of studying music, we realized that the phrasing, what is really the intelligence and emotion at the heart of music, is often away from the beats and away from the measure lines. It's only broadly painted in these written dynamics, that is loud or soft. That is where hearing and understanding begin, along with our path to create. Like music, the true nature of healing is not in the electronic medical record. It's not in the rote questions that we ask our patients to make sure that nothing is missed when we interview them. We must hear and feel the flow of our relationship with the patients and their families to find the art of feeling. Finally, after years of study and truly listening to our patients and carefully examining them, we pay attention to the technology and what that's teaching us. We can finally also begin to feel and see the ebb and flow of their illness. Now, in music, we study to produce the sound of our instruments and how they blend with others. We later realize that the most poignant moments in music are often in near silence or silence itself. In the clinic, a moment of quiet support, a hand on the shoulder, often means much more and is more healing than detailed explanations. Struggling to fill these quiet moments is often the wrong answer. Training in music helps teach us to recognize and see the value of these quiet moments. They are not empty. They're often very meaningful. Finally, I would say that nothing trains our senses better than the arts. We see, we hear, and we touch with more sensitivity, having had training in the arts. I have had important findings on physical examination over the years that I don't think I would have had without the sensitivity that musical training has given me. Some of them have made a difference, and I think have allowed me to cure a patient from their cancer where I might not have otherwise. Now, none of what I've said is rigorous science. I'll certainly leave that to others. But I do think that some of these represent good examples of the sorts of things we lose when we don't support the arts, and we see how much we can gain individually by participating in the arts. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that. And that's a great transition to Psyche Loui, who is a violinist in the symphony, and she's an assistant professor of creativity and creative practice in the Department of Music at Northeastern University, where she works in the Mind Lab. And the Mind Lab is the Music, Imaging, and Neural Dynamics Lab, which studies the neuroscience of music perception and cognition. Dr. Loui, I'm thrilled you're here. You know, someone once said, one cannot inherit a talent for playing the violin because there are like no violins in nature, right? And I just thought, I remember that just stuck with me forever, and I was like, that's the reason I'm never going to play the violin, okay? But I was hoping that you would tell us a little bit more about your research and the role of music and the brain throughout life.
Thank you, Amitabh. I think it's so funny that you say you can't inherit talent for playing the violin. People say that about having absolute pitch as well, and you can't inherit, that's something that you're born with. But of course, Mozart, who clearly had absolute pitch, he had absolute pitch for an A that was a different frequency from what it is now, right? So a lot of the things that we think are talent are really lots of hard work and also a lot of our statistical learning mechanism. I think there's a lot of what we know that is because of the brain's ability to absorb sounds in the environment. And I think of music as really a great way to look at exactly that, how our brains learn and how our brains rapidly adapt and are flexible and become creative. So I have a couple of visuals here. If I can just click. Great, so my lab studies music. It's at the center of what I do. It's just, my lab is part of the Center for Cognitive and Brain Health in Northeastern University. It's just down the street. Welcome to visit us. In my lab, we have a jam room where we look at behavior and psychophysics. People bring instruments in, and we record their playing, and we analyze their playing. We also have an EEG system. This is a picture of my mom getting her brain potentials recorded. So she's got 64 channels of electrodes on her scalp, and from which we can get a very clear temporal dynamic of brain activity. And we also have an MRI. So that's not my mom getting her brain image recorded. And then we also look at sound analysis, right? So all the sounds that you hear today are vibrations of air molecules on your eardrums, and somehow our brains are able to take these vibrations and translate that into a beautiful, subjective, and rewarding experience. And so my life's work is to find out how that happens. And we do this using a variety of fun tools. This is one image. It's called diffusion tensor image. And what we do, it's a type of magnetic resonance image. And what it does is it looks at the diffusion properties of water in the brain. And by playing a kind of connect the dots game with these types of images, I've spent quite a lot of time looking at this particular superhighway in the brain. It's called the arcuate fasciculus. It is bigger and better connected in children who learn music, who have musical training. It is also more developed in singers. It is less developed in people who are tone deaf. So I don't know if any of you think that you might be tone deaf or particularly bad at karaoke, or know someone who's particularly bad at karaoke. Part of my life's work has been really going to karaoke bars and watching people sing badly and then recruiting them for our studies. But it turns out, lots of fun. I'm the most serenaded, so many people have sung happy birthday to me in very interestingly out of tune ways, and we analyzed those ways. And it turns out that people who are tone deaf have less connectivity in this arcuate fasciculus. And also another group that has less connectivity in the arcuate fasciculus is people who have dyslexia, right? So children who have difficulty learning to read and spell, it turns out that their reading abilities are correlated with the connectivity of this pathway as well. So by looking at these pathways, I think we can look at rehabilitating some of these cognitive and communicative functions. So of course, most of us don't listen to music so that we can excel at karaoke. We look at music because we enjoy listening to music, right? So the effect of music on the reward system is something that I'm very interested in as well. So I don't know if any of you have the experience of listening to something that's really beautiful and just having your mind taken away from where you are, right? It's as if the music has transformed you to a different part of your experience. And what we've seen is that people who tend to have these strong emotional experiences like chills, the chill type experience when listening to music, tend to have more functional connectivity between auditory areas of the brain and the areas of your brain that are important for social processing and emotional processing. In other words, the areas of my brain that are used to think about what you're thinking and what you're thinking are more connected to my auditory areas. And I think that's something that's quite special about what music does. It's an auditory channel towards areas of the brain that are important for social and emotional functions. We also have a lot of I know that in business school, perhaps networking and connectivity might be a very important part of what we think about. Brain networks are also something that we're very interested in. This on the left is two brain networks that are often anti-correlated with each other. One's called the default mode network, which we use when we're thinking about ourselves and when we're thinking about other people and when we're being imaginative and creative. And what we're seeing is that this network, default mode network, is actually more active and more functionally connected with areas that you use to do executive control tasks such as math. In people who are trained to improvise musically, especially jazz improvising musicians. So I think there's something about music that can look at creativity in real time as well. I think that I will also show a little bit of, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in a business school about innovation and how you can consolidate your ideas towards something that is translatable. And this is something I'm very interested in as well in my work. So here I'm showing you, I'll play the movie in a moment, but at the top it's called a modulation spectrum of the musical energy. So I showed you in the beginning, we use sound analysis tools. So this is one of these sound analysis tools that is specifically looking at how focused energy in acoustics, in the sound, might be able to drive your brain, right? And one way in which this might be helpful is we all have to do cognitive tasks on a daily basis. How many of you listen to music when you work? Okay, so about half the room. How many people cannot listen to music when they work? The other half of the room, right? And so the question is what kind of music might be useful for working? And with lots of research, I think that this might be one way to get at this. So I'm about to play you the music, and what you'll see is different blobs of activity that are showing different waves of energy that we're seeing can drive the brain in a very efficient manner. So you'll see there's a bump around 14.7 hertz, and that's part of what's known as the beta range in brain potentials. And what we're seeing is that your brain waves really focused in those regions, and they're useful for attentive and sustained attention as well. So I think there's a lot to be done in both the pure neuroscience of why we have music and also the translational neuroscience of how music can be used to help people towards better brain health. So I think I'll stop there.
And we'll come back to you. That's exciting. Len, let's talk about the trumpet.
All right.
You know, I feel like this space was actually built for the trumpet, right? I shouldn't tell the dean that, but really, yeah, it just bloomed and blossomed when you played. So Dr. Leonard Zon has played the trumpet with the symphony, and he's been with the symphony for 35 years. When he's not playing the trumpet, he is the Gruspek Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School, an investigator with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and the director of the stem cell program at the Children's Hospital in Boston. His research focuses on two major developing areas: modeling human diseases in zebrafish and stem cell biology. And the two of us are connected because we're both involved in that joint degree program in the life sciences that HBS just launched. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank all of you for coming. So I'm a hematologist, so I take care of kids who have blood diseases or cancer. And I've been playing the trumpet, as you said, for a long time. And I kind of feel that the trumpet is a great, avenue to pursue, which is outside of my field. So it just, when I go downstairs and practice every day, it's really great because it lets me get away from what I usually do. But I actually love what I do, and so I thought I would play you a few slides here in movies. I'll turn around a little bit. So again, I'm a hematologist, so stem cells are really interesting because you can have a bone marrow transplant, and probably somebody in the audience has had that procedure. And so what happens is if you have leukemia, let's say, we can treat a patient with high-dose chemotherapy and erase the leukemia, but unfortunately their immune system is also erased. And so we need to rescue their immune system, and one way to do that is to take your brother or sister's bone marrow, which contains stem cells, and literally infuse them into the patient, and then it will go in and home to the bone marrow and set up the process of blood formation. And for the rest of your life, you'll run your blood after your brother or sister's immune system. So it's quite an amazing process. And the problem is about 25% of people die from the procedure, and so there's a great need in making this more safe. And so my lab has been studying that, and we use a zebrafish as a model system. So what I thought I would do is to show you a movie of the birth of a blood stem cell. And so what happens here, hopefully, yeah, great. So basically this is a zebrafish embryo at 36 hours. And we're going to watch the blood stem cells being born in the aorta. This is the same place it's born when you were an embryo. And what happens is a blood vessel changes its fate, and it rounds up, and it becomes a blood stem cell. And that stem cell is mobile, and it's going to go off into circulation, and it's going to go round and around circulation, and it lands in a place where it sets up home. So you'll see that green stem cell go all the way to the back in the tail in the fish, and it will land in this transient place that happens when you're a fetus, and it would have been in your fetal liver. The stem cell transmigrates outside the blood vessels, and then it starts doubling, and then a stem cell will go back into circulation and find a new home. And in this case, it'll go to the marrow. In the fish, it's actually in the kidney, and it would be in your bones. And that lets the animal have blood, really, by being formed in the kidney. Some of the cells will bypass the kidney and go to the thymus. That sets the immune system up. And again, all this allows the animal to have blood really throughout its entire lifetime. So one of the things about the fish that's quite amazing is we've seen all of those events happen live. And I thought I would show you a movie of what happens when the stem cell lands. And really this had never been seen before, but was observable in the fish. And so here you can see in that circle, the green stem cell comes in and it goes outside the blood vessels. But then we saw something which was strange. The blood vessels wrap themselves back around the stem cell. And we call this blood vessel cuddling. And that allows the stem cell to have a niche and to be able to differentiate and to divide. And in that movie, you saw one stem cell went off into circulation and the other one stayed. So the fish is really great as a screening system to find drugs for people. And so in this early experiment, I see Wolfram Gosling in the audience. He was the one who did this experiment in my lab about 10 or 15 years ago. And we took embryos, and you could just incubate chemicals in the water. And we found a drug, which is on the bottom, called prostaglandin E2, that could stimulate stem cells. And that's one of the problems that we have clinically, is people just don't have enough stem cells. And so we ended up starting a company on this, and we ran a clinical trial. And what we saw was that we had people getting a cord blood sample. There's another source of blood stem cells. And we had one cord blood which was treated and the other one was untreated. And we put them both into the patient. And the treated cord was the one that won, meaning that the drug we had discovered actually works in humans. So it works in fish and works in humans. And we've actually treated 150 people with this drug. And so we hope it's on the way to approval. And so it's very, very exciting. So the other thing that I thought I'd talk about is our work on cancer. And some of you may have a mole, don't worry. But you have about a 90% chance of having a mutation called BRAF. And that mutation will cause a field of cells, but unfortunately sometimes a single cell will transform and it will start dividing. And if that cell goes beneath this skin, it can spread, and that's a very devastating disease called melanoma. So we've been working on this, and this is a fish that has a fluorescent gene that's on in stem cells, but then shut off, but you can see that the tumor, when that gene comes back on, it's on. And so that fish has a green glowing tumor. And but we saw with this was this gene was very special. And ever so often you would see a normal fish, looks pretty normal, but when we shine the light on it, what we would see is a patch. And 100% of the patches became cancer. So we could see cancer at a very, very early stage before it was even observable. And then we went ahead and looked, and we had some fish that had one cell, one green cell. And 100% of the time, that single cell became the tumor. So we could see cancer when it was one cell. It's the first time that's ever been seen. And we've been looking and trying to understand more about this. One of our surprise findings that we've just recently discovered is there's a little zone of cells around that cell that are actually transformed. And so there's some event that even happens before the cell has actually turned on this green color. And so by discovering drugs that might stop this process, you might be able to prevent cancer even before it even begins. And this is just a movie of that. What we found was that during embryogenesis, the cells, the melanocytes, are derived from those stem cells. And here's an adult fish. And what we would see is a single cell would actually transform. And it would turn the program back to the stem cell program. And once that happened, it turned on a set of genes that are on in the stem cells and on in the embryo. And a lot of people think cancer is kind of embryonic at origin. And so the same genes that are on in the tumor are found in those stem cells in the embryo. And so the object here would be basically if you could find a drug that would shut this off, maybe a cream that you would put in suntan lotion, then you would actually stop the process even before it started. So anyway, I just wanted to say it's really a pleasure. It's a pleasure to play the trumpet. I'm glad the first piece is over. And thank you very much.
Awesome. That's great. It's my great honor to introduce Dr. Lisa Wong, who is a physician and musician who has dedicated her life to lifelong learning and healing through the arts. She's an international speaker on the arts and health and is a co-founder of the Arts and Humanities Initiative at Harvard Medical School. and at the Boston Arts Consortium for Health. She's an assistant professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. She's practiced at Milton Pediatrics for 34 years and encourages all her patients to play music. Lisa has been a member of the Longwood Symphony and has served as its president. She led the LSO in creating its signature Healing Art of Music program that raises all those terrific funds and awareness for Boston-based medical nonprofit organizations. And I also wanted to put in a plug for her first book, Scales to Scalpels, Doctors Who Practice the Healing Arts of Music and Medicine. So, Lisa, welcome. And tell us more about how the arts and music sort of intertwine to heal us.
Thank you, Amitabh, and welcome everybody. It's really such a pleasure for us to come here and show you all of the different aspects of who we are. I first started the Longwood Symphony back in 1985, and I was still a senior resident in pediatrics at Mass General, and Len's wife, Linda Schneider, was a fellow resident. And there was a brand new orchestra, and Len said, you really should join this new orchestra of doctors. And so I did. And there I found a real community of like-minded people, not only on stage, but also in the wards and in the clinics. So can you imagine, usually during break after orchestra, between the first and a half of the rehearsal, people are just talking about, what did your dog do, or things like that. We're here saying, what kind of rosin to use on your bow? How do I make this diagnosis for this abdominal pain patient? And who shall I refer this patient to? So the conversation was pretty robust. And what was really interesting also was what we saw was a breakdown of walls. We happen to be from mainly the Harvard Medical School, but in our orchestra we have people from Tufts, we have people from Boston University, we have people from multiple hospitals, and also, so that broke down these walls, but there is a hierarchical wall that is also broken down. I remember hearing Tom asking Michael Barnett, who was our new principal oboe, tips on how to play the oboe, but then Michael would turn around and say, I've got an exam next week, can you help me with oncology, because he was a first-year medical student. So my part of this amazing panel is to reflect on the other aspect of who we are in the Longwood Symphony. We're members of the healthcare community, and I wanted to clarify, we're not all doctors. We've got educators, science researchers, computer scientists, physical therapists, nurses, but all of us, I think one of the threads that goes through all of this is that we all have learned, as Tom was talking about giving and empathy as being a real part of who we are on stage and off. You probably noticed, and we're going to be playing a couple other pieces, but take a look at the body language that's going on. We are all looking at each other, making eye contact. The people behind the stand in the front is following the bows so that we're making sure that we align our bows with the people around us. And what you're not seeing is that we're also listening laterally. We're also listening sympathetically and collaboratively, both for intonation, but also quality of sound and intention. So those kinds of things are led by our conductor, Ronnie Feldman, but it's beyond what Ronnie's giving us some of the information. We are giving information to each other all the time. So this results in a few things. One is that we have to bring our whole selves to every rehearsal and to every performance. It's more musically rewarding, and I would say it's also therapeutic for us, but it's also quite a metaphor for what we do in the hospitals. We can't bring part of ourselves to the hospital. We'll miss a diagnosis. We won't be working with the team. If we're on a surgical team, if one person's checked out, things aren't going to run smoothly. And so our playing a chamber orchestra, chamber music here is like the chamber music we're doing on the wards and in the hospital. And it's really interesting. So at 7 o'clock, we have rehearsals from 7 to 10. At 7 o'clock, you have a whole bunch of people coming in from the medical area, absolutely exhausted. One of them experiment just failed. Somebody else has an exam tomorrow. Somebody may have just seen a patient in the emergency room and dealt with medical trauma. But within about 15 minutes, those identities fall away, and we become an orchestra. And the sound changes, and by 10 o'clock, there's a spring in everyone's step as they're leaving rehearsal. What is it? Is it camaraderie? Partly. Is it nonverbal expression? Partly. Is it concentration, like Psyche was saying? We're using parts of our brain that are giving us chills. Is it the group trying to make something beautiful together? All of these things, I think, are what are going on. And for me, it's a prescription for burnout prevention, for resilience for the players, and then we get to do the next thing, which is to play our music for you, the audience. And the Healing Art of Music program that you talked about, Amitabh, is the third part of who we are, because all that we do is always giving our music back to make the world better. We fashion ourselves after Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who about 100 years ago founded a hospital in Gabon. He was a noted Bach specialist, a theologian, a scholar, an organist, but then he heard about the healthcare disparities in Africa, went to medical school, and then left to be in Africa. And he actually would support his hospital by going back and playing concerts. But it's what Schweitzer does that has inspired us to look at each concert as an opportunity to be the doctor for another organization. How can we heal another nonprofit organization? So we meet them where they're at. Each of them have different needs, and we help them to find what works for them and help them to raise money for their organization. So this is the third piece of who we are as an organization. We're healthcare providers, musicians, and stewards of the health of our wider world and community. And that's what feeds our souls and keeps us coming back to rehearsals and to come on stage to play for you.
Lisa, do you, I think we have time, let me ask you a question. We heard this idea that maybe we could catch and treat cancer early, but when I thought about your comments, I started to wonder, are there tips that you could share with us on, I'm thinking of wellness more than anything else. So even before I sort of, sink into this well, are there things that I should be thinking about that I could do with music to enhance my wellness?
I think the third piece of who Longwood is the answer. Because when we first started playing, it was, this is great, we're doctors and we're playing music and we love to do it, and we did it together. That was never quite enough. When we found that we could give our music away and we would get so much back from giving it away, that was the piece of it. And so that's what I actually prescribe to my patients. When they're stressed, I've been in the same practice for 34 years, and so my patients are bringing their babies back to me. But in the bumpy areas of 18 to 22 or so, when I'm taking care of the teenagers and the older adolescents, they're looking for what can they do to make themselves feel less anxious and feel less stressed. And the answer is not as much keep on looking this way as go out that way. Do something to help the world outside and give a little bit of yourself away, and it'll come back to you. And if you have a gift of something like music, that's even easier, because you can. Wow. There are so many people who want to hear music. You can play in homeless shelters, you can play in hospitals, you can play for children with disabilities, and there's so much that you learn from having done that.
Speaking of people who want to hear more music, I think we should bring the orchestra back up on stage.
Excellent.
You guys are playing musical chairs on me. Okay, I can make this work. I think I can make this work. But we have Ronnie Feldman, the conductor, joining us, and I thought that it would be really fun to have him up here on stage because, I mean, you saw what just happened. He was playing and conducting at the same time, and so I just wanted to ask you, you know, you're using both your hands, so you can't shape the music the way you were shaping in the first piece, and so how exactly do you do that?
As you can see, I'm a cellist who conducts. That's how I always mention myself to anyone who asks me about my conducting, the things that I do as a conductor. But I'm following the concertmaster. She's the one who's giving a lot of the information, and what we are doing when we're playing without a conductor is we're showing leadership and taking ownership of what's going on in the music. So that's something that this orchestra does really well. We've done it a couple of times where we've played without a conductor, and everybody just steps really forward and takes ownership of all of the music that they're playing individually. They pay attention to each other. As Lisa said earlier, you just focus on so many different things. You're looking at bows, you're looking at fingers moving, all sorts of different things in order to stay in order to have really good ensemble.
But if you, I mean, are you glaring at people? How exactly does this work, right? I'm trying to get at, there's some kind of very powerful transmission of information between you and the other members of the orchestra, but both your hands, you're doing something else with. So you've got to be using your eyes, your eyebrows, your mouth, everything else. And I'm just trying to understand from your point of view, how are you communicating with the rest of them?
I'm doing what everyone else is doing when I'm not conducting.
Okay.
Everyone's just paying attention. You show up at rehearsals, you're prepared to play, so you're listening to what's going on, you're listening to your section, you're listening to the people who are around you, and you're just paying attention to everything that's going on. There are rhythms that are not the same as yours, but they have to intersect properly. There are dynamics that you follow. We learn how to play really soft. We learn what playing loud is. Every dynamic has a different color. You can play a loud dynamic with many different colors, and people just sort of buy into it as you're playing. You get a feel for what everyone's doing and what the color of the music requires. It's everybody taking ownership of what's going on.
Psyche?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the role of music in setting up our expectations, right? And I think it's partly because we've done this together before, we've rehearsed this, we know exactly when to expect things to happen, right? So, and I think music is especially useful as a tool for learning how those expectations occur, and we know from tons of neuroscience studies now that expectations are related to the reward system, right? So even before something good happens, your reward system is going crazy. Your dopamine rush is already happening. And I think that when there's a group performance together, it really brings us together in that our reward systems are in sync. So that would be the neuroscientist's model of why music works and why group music especially works.
Yeah, Lisa.
And what happened over the last couple of, during our rehearsals, was that there was a consensus building. We tried things different ways to see if it would work better if we slowed down for 3 bars or if we slowed down for 1 bar. And so Ronnie was the person to moderate that. He said, great, let's hear both ideas and let's see which one works. And then once we came to a consensus, then the entire ensemble decides that that's what they're going to do. And when we're performing, there's an extra heightened sense of attention that's being played, and that's what we felt on stage.
But so go from that to the practice of medicine. There must be parallels between working in a medical team and working in a chamber ensemble like this.
Absolutely. As I said before, when there's especially, it's easiest to understand in something like a surgical team or in a lab. You guys you run teams and labs, and you suggest things, but you help your postdocs and others to move along.
On my side, I have 42 people in the lab, and so basically, I have certain expectations that things are going to move at a certain pace, and that also the team is going to work together. They're going to know about each other's work, so that we have lab meetings to make sure that they're aware, and so they're working with their own senses to kind of come in together and play together. So I think it's a coordinated behavior at the end of the day.
Another metaphor that I would use is the notion of dissonance. You know, in music, sometimes things that aren't harmonic, that are dissonant, are actually very beautiful, and it's something to listen for. And I think, you know, I've been running a department for a long time, and sometimes you will see, you know, you have to be alert to when there's dissonance, when people aren't getting along, when patients are unhappy, and kind of be alert to what's happening and not shun them. You know, you have to kind of embrace these dissonances. Sometimes they're very good for everybody, they're learning experiences, but you know, these are the sorts of things that one can hear that I think maybe training in the arts helps you hear a little better.
I think sometimes also we're kind of both in the oncology field, and used to be you were seen by a surgeon or you were seen by an oncologist, but now many people are seen by everybody together, and it's kind of like its own little orchestra to design a program for somebody who has a new tumor, and so it's all done together.
But you know, in music you still have the conductor, and like when I go for my care, there's no conductor, and if these physicians all decide to kind of coordinate, it works, but there isn't a conductor. So I'm wondering whether there's a part of this that medicine should learn from.
I mean, I think you do have a slight, there's a couple people who take a conductive role. So, you know, your primary care doctor has a lot of influence on how the teams of consultants will actually work. So I think in a lot of ways, you know, you can trust your primary care person to get to an answer if you're not happy with how the team is actually functioning. So I look at them as kind of conducting in general, but it might also be whatever particular doctor you need at that time is kind of leading the other groups to try to help out.
But I know what I'm conducting, I know that the orchestra is looking at what I'm doing with my hands, because it gives information. They're also looking at my face also, and at my eyes, because that gives a lot of information. But the most important thing that we do when we're playing an orchestra is listen to each other and really to take leadership. I know that I played in an orchestra that had about 105 people for many years, and I felt that where I was sitting, people around me were going to benefit from my taking it seriously and being prepared. You know, so that's the kind of leadership that you can give when you're not the leader of the group, but you're creating a leadership area wherever you're playing.
Would you all be willing to take some questions from the audience? Because I think we'd have a lot of fun with that. Okay, great. So let's open it up to questions. Yes, in the middle of the room. Yes, please.
I was wondering if Lisa could speak a little bit to the Arts and Humanities Initiative at HMS. I'm just wondering what kind of innovation is happening with the arts in medical education, because frankly, like, I didn't go to medical school because I felt like my creativity and frankly my humanity was being pretty stifled as a pre-med, and I'm just wondering what's happening in the field of medical education now.
Thanks for that question. The Arts and Humanities Initiative at the Harvard Medical School was started about 6 years ago, but we're actually part of a national wave. The Association of American Medical Colleges has actually just also started an Arts and Humanities track because they were realizing that we had swung so far into thinking that medicine equaled science when really medicine is an art. And so the Arts and Humanities Initiative that we have at the Harvard Medical School is made up of poets who are doctors, writers who are doctors, dancers who are doctors, musicians who are doctors, and we're all looking at the way we practice medicine and how, like we're discussing, how our practice of medicine is improved by embracing our arts, not only because it balances us personally, but because of the way we listen, the way we observe, the way we express ourselves, or we listen to how our patient is expressing themselves. The arts have a way of getting past a lot of the barriers of how are you, I am fine, to really getting into the heart of wellness, as you were talking about before.
Is this program only for people who are already artists, or?
The program's not only for people who are artists. In fact, the goal for most medical schools is to reach those who think that the arts are no longer part of their life. So we bring medical students to the art museum and work with them looking at a single piece of art for 20, 30 minutes, and they find that their observation skills are honed, and the questions that they ask and the questions that their colleagues are asking inform them about what they're seeing. And they're sometimes surprised or delighted to find that when they go back to the wards, they see their patients in a different way, and they can observe more shadows, more colors. They ask different questions than they had before they'd gone to the museum.
Other questions? Yes, in the front, please.
So is there a difference between the response of the brain for Western versus Eastern-based music?
There's a difference in the sense that we're most used to what's in our culture. But what I've seen is that within about 20 minutes of exposure to a new, unfamiliar musical system, your brain actually adapts quite rapidly. And I think that we use the same kind of mechanism as we use for learning language, right? So babies, when they're learning language, they're not being told that certain words are supposed to go with certain other words. You have to learn that from exposure. So I think the same kind of mechanism is going on to help us learn music. And so I think that if you go to, let's say, a pentatonic musical culture, at first everything's going to sound out of tune or odd, and then after a while it will sound natural. So I think that there's something about music that helps us explore new things as well. And I think that when in music, when we're talking about the new things, I think it's really about the statistical probabilities of what sounds follow what other sounds. Yeah. And I think it's also the mark of just intelligent persons in general, right? I mean, as a lab director, you want to tell people one thing, and you want them to generalize to the next thing. And I think that's what our brains are able to do when we're listening to music as well.
Yeah. I saw a hand up over there. Yes.
Just to kind of drill into that question a little bit more, have you found in your studies that there's a particular composer that has a great effect, like, I mean, the Mozart effect, but also that we've read about might be one, but what about other composers? And what about how you can differentiate the effect of classical versus non-classical music?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of years of work on classical training in the sense of contemporary conservatory training that does not emphasize improvisation, as opposed to improvisation training, especially in jazz improv. And what we're seeing is, some of which I showed you before, that areas of the brain that are important for thinking about other people and also for being creative, sort of this general default mode process, that tends to be more active and more flexible in people who improvise. In terms of which composers, I mean, we've looked at, usually the composers that you like to listen to the most are going to drive your reward system. I mean, so I'm not really telling you what to listen to, but I do know that there's some really fascinating studies looking at particular musical structures. So, for example, musical chords. So slightly unexpected chords sometimes are unexpected in ways that are beautiful, right? And so those types of beautiful dissonances can drive your reward system in a way that makes you more likely to cry or makes your heart skip a beat, right? So these sort of chill-inducing moments are something that you can find in the musical structure itself. For example, also melodically, there are certain turns and twists of melodies that are, let's say, in Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, one of my favorite pieces. It's a little cheesy. Some might think it's cheesy. I think it's very beautiful. There are some melodical moments that, when people hear them, they're more likely to report, for example, tearing up, right? So these are physiological moments that individual musical structures can actually elicit, and I find that to be really, really beautiful.
I think as a trumpet player, it's got to be Mahler.
And I think it's Brahms.
And Psyche, didn't you say that somebody who's a jazz-trained person may perceive a chord differently than a person who's been trained classically?
It's all about our expectations, right? So jazz-trained musicians are actually more embracing of the unexpected compared to classically trained musicians. So if you play a chord progression that ends with a dissonance, a lot of classical musicians will think, oh, that sounds wrong, right? And so your brain potentials show that you're kind of ruminating about it way after it's happened. Jazz musicians are actually much more sensitive early on. They're like, oh, something unexpected happened. What can I do with that, right? And then but then after they've done what they've done with it, they actually forget it sooner, right? So more acceptance of the unexpected and more incorporating of that unexpectedness into your repertoire, as opposed to sort of the classical way of thinking, which is let's avoid mistakes.
Yeah, this is terrific. Can we bring the orchestra back up here and hear the last piece? Thank you.
Thank you.
Felix Mendelssohn composed 12 of these string symphonias before he was 14 years old. Absolutely wonderful. The 10th one is what we're going to do for you in B minor.
Thank you. That's the end of the evening, and I just wanted to wrap up by saying this event was all about community, and that's a two-way relationship. You all came to be part of this community, and I just wanted to thank one more time this wonderful group of individuals for sharing their beautiful music and amazing science with us this evening. So one more time, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome.